back to the Courage to Live podcast. It's one thing to survive, it's another to find the courage to live. I'm retired Captain Josh Bitsko. I'm joined with my co-host and wife, Jenna Bitsko.
Hi.
In our last podcast, we talked about kind of my story, how I got into policing and, you know, my career arc. But we also mentioned some of the different traumatic incidents and critical incidents that I've been involved in. So today we're going to talk about the Route 91 Harvest Festival shooting in Las Vegas, where I mentioned that in this incident we had 58 people killed, 455 people either shot or hit with frag, and over 800 injuries, be it trampling or trying to get out. And it really, that event changed so much. It changed me personally, and almost every cop I know that responded to it. It had a profound effect on them, but it also changed Las Vegas. And it had, we took a black eye that day in Vegas and as a police department, but we also came together as a community afterwards. And it really, that part of it was very inspiring. And for those that don't know, in October 1st of 2017, an armed gunman went up to the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay across the street from the Route 91 Harvest Festival. The Route 91 Harvest Festival is a 3-day country concert, and it really was one of those festivals that, everybody wanted to go to, and every cop I know wanted to work because it was just, good people. You're out there getting thanked for being out there. Maybe flirt with a couple cowgirls, when you're working overtime. Not me, of course.
Never.
But it was what the overtime every cop wanted to work until it wasn't. And the suspect, and on this podcast, I'm not going to say his name. When I teach my class, I go into really the details of the event. But here I don't like giving him any more notoriety because, as we know, a lot of these active shooters do it just for that, to get that notoriety in. So I'm not going to say his name today, but he went up to the 32nd floor. He broke out the window. He had room 135, and next to him was 134
Of the Mandalay Bay.
Of the Mandalay Bay. Mm-hmm. And he had adjoining rooms. He broke out the windows, and using semi-automatic rifles with bump stocks to simulate fully automatic fire, he shot down into the crowd for 12 minutes. Fully automatic gunfire, and just causing an insane amount of chaos and carnage. And truly what it was is horror.
Still the worst mass shooting in United States history to date.
Yes. And it's funny because at times when I first was talking about it, I would get emotional, and I would always get emotional at different parts of it. And I remember talking to my therapist. I'm like, I just don't understand why it's not like, okay, this part I thought I was going to die, or this part, I made this decision and it was really heavy. And I remember saying, but I don't always I get emotional at different parts throughout. And he just said, you experienced horror. And so many of the concert goers and victims and other first responders that were out there experienced the same thing. It just, it's seldom you have an event that had just thousands and thousands of people that were affected by, impacted by, on every different level. Mm-hmm. Somebody just, a kid at a concert, all the way up to an experienced police officer or SWAT officer responding to it. And, the dispatchers and doctors at every hospital that was flooded with victims.
And just a disclaimer, this is obviously a very emotional topic. So Josh gets emotional from time to time, and that's okay. And it's a hard thing to talk about. And just for those listening, if you knew somebody at the concert or you were there yourself, just know that, Josh is here. What are we at? 8 years later, almost. Yeah. And it's still something that he's dealing with every single day. So our hearts go out to you. And this episode is really truly to not just tell Josh's story, but so that people can hear and understand the impact that it had, not only on that day, but also the impact it continues to have on the first responders, on the concert goers, and with the victims' families. I mean, they are gone, and so we truly speak about this event to honor them as well.
Absolutely. So he was shooting from an elevated position, right, down into the crowd, fully automatic gunfire. Unlike anything that I had even trained for, when you train for active shooters, you think of, I mean, Columbine obviously comes to mind, but there's so many, unfortunately, these tragic events that happen around the country. And, generally it's somebody moving through a crowd shooting people. But in this scenario, it was somebody barricaded in a room on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay shooting into a crowd, which enough similarities to be, okay, we know it's an active shooter and an active shooter response, but different enough to be add obstacles and difficulty to the actual response as well. So, you had people there. Jason Aldean was up on the stage. He was the last act of the festival. And, you had concert goers enjoying the night. It's, sounds of music and like any concert, any festival, just people having a good time. And the suspect began shooting, initially just a couple single shots, and people thought they were firecrackers. They thought they were, car backfiring. And some people, if you look at some of the videos from the concert, realized pretty quick that it was gunfire. And then he started shooting fully automatic gunfire into the crowd. And if you don't know what a bump stock is, it's a device that attaches to the back of a semi-automatic rifle, and it causes the gun to bounce with a spring. So every time the gun lurches forward from the recoil, the trigger's pulled. And it was at the time one of those loopholes around not getting a federal stamp to get a fully automatic weapon. So he began shooting into the crowd, and as I mentioned before, just causing chaos. Chaos that was made worse because you have an open microphone on stage. So gunfire is not only coming from the Mandalay Bay, but it's coming from the speakers at the front of the concert. And you had officers immediately pinned down by gunfire. One of the responding officers, it was his first day out of the academy in field training, was shot in the arm. And we had another officer that was off duty at the concert, Charleston Hadfield, that was helping get people out of the concert and was shot and killed. Among, again, 57 other victims that were killed that night.
And two additional since then that have died from their injuries.
Correct. And we don't want to leave them out as well. I mean, this event had such a huge impact on so many people involved. So I was actually training dogs when I heard the call. I was probably like 5 to 6 minutes away. I had on my radio, I listened to Scan, so I could listen to every radio channel at once. The rest of my team was not in uniform except for another canine officer, Dave Newton. And when I heard automatic gunfire over the radio, I looked down to see what channel it was on, and I saw it was from our Convention Center Area Command, which is the Strip. And I knew immediately, like, there's an active shooter on the Strip. It's the only reason you would hear gunfire like that in that area, right? There's no, like, gang wars or anything like that going on in that area. It would just be that. So I grabbed the officer that was in uniform. I'm like, let's go. The other canine handler. And I told the rest of the team, get dressed out here and meet us there. Because, we don't want officers trying to put on their gear and while they're driving or show up without their vest on. And I began to drive extremely fast to get there, which you might find funny because, I generally drive like an old man.
He does.
Also, if you have an unsecured dog in a car all the time, if you take a hard turn, he hits the side, he pouts for the rest of the day. It happens. I was driving very fast to get there. And, there's that wanting to have an impact, that anxiety of what I'm going to see when I get there, that I want to do well. I want to be able to save lives. And so, we put a lot of pressure. I put a lot of pressure on myself, even when I was driving there. So I called the SWAT commander on the phone and like, hey, this is what's going on. It's at the Route 91 festival across from Mandalay Bay because we still didn't know the shooting was coming from the Mandalay Bay. And I think when you look back at these events, sometimes we fail to see the chaos that's ensued and, all the different stuff that's coming out on the radio, all the different 911 calls, trying to figure out what we had. And so he immediately did an all call to get, all the SWAT officers that we had. We had a full-time SWAT team at Metro to start heading to the scene because I knew I was going to need help. We were going to need resources there just based on what I was hearing. And so as I'm getting closer, the officers in the field start to realize that the shooting's coming from the Mandalay Bay. So as we arrive, you have what's called the Shark Reef, which is like an aquarium attached to the Mandalay Bay. A couple 100,000 square feet of convention space, and then the casino floor and hotel tower. So Dave and I went to the Shark Reef because there was no way to get to the front of the hotel without taking fire. You had an officer just shot right there. So we knew, if we can't get to the doors, we can't have an impact, right? So we went in. I called for more officers that met us at the Shark Reef when we arrived. I had 3 detectives in polos, khakis, a bulletproof vest, and a pistol.
That you did not know.
I didn't know. I mean, we're a large agency. We have, roughly 3,600 commissioned officers, 6,000 total employees. I knew maybe their faces, but what I did know about them is they were ready to go. Like they, showed up to have an impact, just like Dave did, just like I did. So we put together our team and start making our way through the casino floor or through the convention space, the aquarium, to get to the casino floor. Still hearing just chaos on the radio, officers getting on. Somebody shot here, somebody shot there, just adding to that, total chaos of, at this point, I'm trying to get my arms around what's even happening. Like, yes, I know someone's shooting from the Mandalay Bay, but in K9, we go to, the most critical incidents on a regular basis. Nothing could have prepared me for this. Like, without somebody sharing their own experience of responding to something. But at this time, nobody had done anything like this anywhere. Still to this point, they haven't. So hearing all this chaos on the radio, we get to the casino floor, and I have my 3 detectives. I have Dave with me, and I needed intel because, again, we just don't know what's going on. So I grabbed one of the detectives and a security officer that was at the podium on the casino floor. I'm like, go to surveillance where all the cameras are and get me intel. I need to try and know what's going on as we're responding. And I remember his partner goes, hey, I'm going to go with him. And I did a quick count. By giving up that one detective, I then had 2 detectives, a canine handler, and me. And I was the only one with a rifle at the time. And so I knew I couldn't give more than one body to that task. But I'll tell you, there was one point when I'm going through the casino floor after that detective started heading to surveillance by himself. And mind you, we don't know. I don't know if somebody's in the casino floor. I don't know if the suspect came out of the room, if there's multiple suspects at this point. I remember thinking, man, I hope that guy doesn't die.
What kind of impact did that have on you as a leader?
Well, in leadership situations, like I've always had to make hard decisions, right? I will say in my career, that was the first time that, not throughout that night, I made other hard decisions too that were similar, but that decision right there was the first time that I even ever had that thought. You ask cops to go into danger as a sergeant. We're going to go clear this room. We're going to go, take this person into custody that may fight. But, that decision, it still, I still get emotional. Mm-hmm. And, you think about it, like one of the big things for me was it's not that I didn't mind, but I knew I was going to be making decisions on this call, sending people into danger. But for me, I didn't want to make the wrong decision and get somebody killed. Like, there's some of it's pressure I'm putting on myself. Some of it's from the position, the role, responding like we did. But I didn't want to make the wrong decision and it result in that.
Well, and at that point, you are sending him into the unknown. He's not with you, near you, part of your team where you can at least see and manage what's going on, right? You are literally sending him to somewhere that you don't even know if it's safe or not.
Correct. By himself.
Right.
Because I had to do a risk reward. Like, I know I'm going up to a room where we are probably going to get into some kind of shooting rather than send one person off into a unknown where they may. And right. So, having to make that quick decision. Yeah, and looking at it now, it was definitely the right decision, but it doesn't mean it wasn't easy.
So, well, and I think too, as at least, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in leadership positions, especially in the world of, policing, first responders, those decisions are life and death. It's not, small potatoes. It is literal life and death. And so you as a leader are carrying that, and you know that every single decision you make results at the base of it in either life or death, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Which just that adds to the pressure that I'm putting on myself, and just the situation adds to it. That's one of the things that I've learned is I've made other decisions that were very hard throughout my career, whether in leadership, whether us running our business, and knowing that, are we going to be able to support our family with our business? Are we going to be able to, if I make this decision and invest this in this aspect of our business, is it going to bankrupt us? And, it's so these kind of decisions, yes, this one was specific, it was life or death, but, you know, it doesn't matter your position. If you are in position of leadership or owning a business, you're going to have to make decisions that it's going to make you feel a kind of way, like, and it's going to be hard. And this was the one up to that point of that night in my career leading up to was one of the most difficult decisions I made. So we made our way to the elevator banks, and I was met with another team. I had another detective sergeant with a couple detectives and officers. And that's really what it is on something like this. Everyone was just throwing together teams of cops to go and to have an impact, right? And so we get on the elevator. We had shut them down, so we had to have an engineer use a key to like activate the elevator and get us back up. And like I said, that engineer was really stressed out. Like everybody knew the gravity of what they were doing and the decisions they were making in those moments.
And side note, the casino is still operating as if nothing is happening. There are people gambling, and people are responding to you guys running in full tactical gear, wondering what's going on because they have no idea. It's so soundproof in those casinos, and there's no windows. So
Yeah, they build them so people don't know
Right.
what's going on outside. It wasn't like an intentional act by the casino. Oh, we're going to keep making money. It's just people didn't know.
Right.
It's again adding to that chaos, but inside they were kind of insulated. We were pushing people back to where we came from when they were reacting to us, because I knew towards the shark reef there wasn't a suspect, that nobody was getting shot over there. So get to the elevators, and this was another decision I made that actually I didn't remember why I made the decision, but it really affected me. Is so I went to the 28th floor, and on the 28th floor got out to go clear up to the 29th floor. And then the other team, I said, go up to the 32nd floor where two officers had gotten to the elevator banks, and, give them support to where, because they could see the suspect's door where he was shooting from. That they were able to find the suspect's door because a security officer happened to be on that floor for an unrelated reason. And when he was on that floor, the suspect saw him because he had cameras set up in front of his door and shot through the door at him, striking him in the leg. And so you had a security officer that had this huge impact on this entire event because he was able to direct us to where he had to go. So again, this wasn't just a police response. It was a community response, right? But I was beating myself up because it took me longer to get to the suspect's door because I went to the 29th floor. I remember 2 days later, I'm listening to the radio traffic, like 2 a.m, that had been released on YouTube because why did I do that? But then when I heard on the radio traffic, it said security was in a shootout on the 29th floor. And that was, you have a security officer shot. By the time that gets to their command center, to our dispatch, to us, there's this like game of telephone. Again, chaos. Communication is terrible. And it's not because the radios didn't work. You just have everybody on this experiencing the worst thing they've ever experienced trying to communicate it at one time, whether it's through 911 calls, social media, officers on the radio. Like it was just a chaotic scene, to say the least. So we got to the 29th floor and started to clear that out, and realizing, okay, there's nothing going on here. This was some sort of miscommunication. So we made our way up to the 32nd floor. Communication was still terrible. I was at this point concerned of blue on blue, which is like getting shot by another officer. It's a military thing that happens in the fog of war and confusion. Also, is when you have communications are strained and chaos, sometimes a good guy can get mistaken for a bad guy, and I was concerned for that. So I'm trying to get on the radio, give our movements. Hey, we're coming out on the 32nd floor. Here's where we're at. Couldn't get on the radio. Finally, it's like, okay, let's just move. And so when we opened the door, I basically ran into Levi Hancock, who was a SWAT officer that had responded, had a team of a couple detectives, a couple officers with him to get there to make a difference. And he got there because when the SWAT officer made the all call, he was available and was able to get to the scene quick. Because here's the truth about active shooters: we love our SWAT teams. They train, they have the gear and everything they need to handle, any kind of critical incident. But they're not the ones that are generally going to have an impact on these. It's going to be our patrol officers or detectives, security officers. I mean, it's because it takes time for SWAT to get to places. So
just backing up just a little bit before you meet up with Levi, how are this team of officers that you've never worked with before? You guys are riding up in the elevator together. You guys are going up to see about the 28th floor. What is their mood? What is the feeling? What is the atmosphere like at that time?
So the energy, you have a lot of emotions in these moments, right? It's something we don't talk about as cops of when something's scary, like, hey, I pinned a badge on my chest, I got a gun, I'm no longer allowed to be afraid of things, right? So we don't ever talk about that. There's a real stigma about talking about being afraid or being anxious or worried about making the wrong call. You're supposed to know what to do, right? And so I could feel that energy with my team. We're clearing the hallway on the 29th floor and then kind of realizing what we have, but I can feel that there's stress there because I know that I was stressed because I'd never been on anything like this. And in K9, we go on these types of calls, not these types of calls, but critical incidents all the time. So I remember at one point we're going through the hallway and I just tell my team, you guys are doing fucking phenomenal. Beers are on me later. We did have beers later, but the intention of that was, if the sergeant on this is calm, then we can be calm. It's a way to affect the chaos around you. And one thing that I learned up to this point is if I can speak in a low, calm tone of voice, even when things are falling apart, even if that's not how I'm feeling internally, but if I can project that, it'll bring everybody on my team down too. So because they were, stressed and afraid and all of these things, and it's not a knock on them. It's just I was too.
Well, and that's one thing that really sticks out to people when they watch your body camera, which anybody can go on YouTube, all of the body cameras there. But that's one thing that really sticks out to them is that line is, you're doing fucking phenomenal. Bears are on me later, because I feel like you're downplaying it a little bit, but that really is the sign of a good leader, right? You recognized that the energy, that they were scared, because you were scared too. So how could they not be? And you were the leader. So they were all looking to you. And so you recognized that, you felt that, and you did your best to calm that chaos. And that's such a big part of leadership, of being any kind of leader, is recognizing when your team is in turmoil, recognizing when something is scary or when something's exceptionally hard, and not telling them to shut up and quit being wimps or other select words, but it's choosing to go above that and say, hey, everything's okay here. We're going to make it through, and beers are on me later. And that is something that random strangers point out to you. People will watch your body camera before you come and speak to their agency or teach our class that you teach. And that is something that sticks out to people as such a phenomenal part of your leadership style. So I just wanted to point that out.
I appreciate that. And, seeming like a small thing at the time, I had always tried to, in critical incidents, even though internally I wasn't feeling calm, trying to project that because I had leaders before me that did that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if you're up here as a leader, your team's going to match that energy, right?
Absolutely.
But if you're down here, it's going to bring them down as well.
Absolutely. So yeah, we were all up here trying to be down here at this point. And so when we were going to go out into the hallway of the 32nd floor, that's when we run into Levi. Mm-hmm. And I had known Levi for years at this point. We went to SWAT operator school years before that together, been on hundreds of missions. I knew his capabilities. He knew mine. And both of us kind of took a deep breath because I was a sergeant, but because on my team I was the only one with the rifle, I also had to be the lead tactical element because I could hear when we were arriving what the suspect was shooting, and it obviously wasn't a pistol, right? And we wanted to have something that would have that effect, equal firepower. And but when I saw Levi, knowing his capabilities, knowing what he had done in his career, and as a SWAT operator and a really good one at that, like it was like, okay, he had gone out on the 32nd floor, saw the suspect's door, and said he had a plan. He's like, well, let's go down to the 31st floor and we'll go all the way underneath. So if you think about the Mandalay Bay, or a lot of the casinos or hotels that were built at that time, you have a center area with elevators, and then you have wings going off those elevators 250, 300 yards. Each of those wings on the side, there are like regular hotel rooms, and at the end there's a double door with suites, and that's the room the suspect was in. So going down a 300-yard hallway to a door that had been shot through at this point dozens and dozens of times, like there's really no tactical way to approach it.
Well, and you guys knew at this point that he had cameras and could see down the hallway, right?
Well, we didn't know, in fact, that he had cameras, but we did know that he had shot through the door down the hallway. Okay. So he was expecting our approach and had a plan for that. Mm-hmm. So we went down to the 31st floor, went all the way down the hallway, and there was a stairwell next to the suspect's room, the double doors that he had, fire escape stairwell. And so we get to that stairwell and we go up to the 32nd floor. So you have his double doors, then you have the door to the stairwell just to the left of his door. And so we were going to go out, use that door to approach his door. Well, he had taken an L bracket and he had screwed that door shut because he was trying to funnel us. Like I said, he had a plan, wanted to funnel any response down that hallway so he could shoot through the door. He was actually trying to make a shooting port next to his door. He got interrupted at some point, but so he never completed it, but to drill a large hole through his door where he had a scoped AR-10 rifle where he could shoot down the hallway at us with a clear sight. But he had never finished that, which is, thank God that didn't happen. So yeah, he had taken that L bracket, but the one thing Levi was he was also a breacher. Like his job in SWAT, he can do all the different jobs in SWAT, but his main job was breaching through doors. And so he had a little pry bar, used a pry bar, and we popped the little L bracket off and opened the door. And that's where we saw the suspect's door. So to our left was the double doors the suspect was in. He had shot through the door. So there was debris on the ground. You see bullet strikes, around the hallway. Directly across from us was room 134. So 135 was his, and then 134 was facing us directly across, which he had that room out too. And we could tell because in front of that room, there was a room service cart draped with linen. And from the room service cart were wires going under the door. So painting a picture, we have horror going on downstairs. Or outside. I've heard many people dead. I know an officer shot. Another thing that had happened was you had 22,000 people at a concert. And when the shooting started, they all fled. Many of them hurt, injured, and bleeding, going into surrounding businesses. And in those surrounding businesses, they walked in and reported an active shooter, right? They're coming in, there's an active shooter. So what are those businesses, other casinos, the airport that was right there? What happens? They then report active shooters on their properties. So now what I'm hearing on the radio is there's an active shooter at New York, active shooter at Caesars, active shooter at McCarran Airport. And so I know a lot of people are dead below. I'm hearing on the radio there's all these other active shooters happening around Las Vegas, which to me it sounded like a coordinated attack on Las Vegas. Years before in Mumbai, there was a coordinated terrorist attack where they used explosives with rifles and gunmen that would kill a lot of people. And that was in conjunction with explosions that happened around. So all of that and my training up till that point is, okay, this cart in front of us with wires coming from it underneath into an involved room, we all thought it was a bomb. An improvised explosive device set up for us. He had also, again, shot through the door. So in our heads, it's, we now have this explosive, which is now another obstacle placed in our path. And I'm confronted with another decision at this point. So mind you, we ran through convention space, aquarium, casino floor to get here. So I can run down to our cars and grab a bomb dog, explosive detector dog that we could deploy on the cart to see if it alerted. But that would take another 30 minutes. Now, that's 30 minutes that all the people below in my mind aren't getting the medical attention they need. Now, what I didn't know is our Clark County Fire Department EMS had violated their own policies and went forward to help people anyway, but they still couldn't do it at the level that they needed to without us clearing that room. At this point, the suspect had stopped shooting, so we didn't even know if he was still in there. We, figured he was, and now turning his attention towards us. So I knew that we didn't have the time for that. Call for a bomb squad would take even longer than getting a bomb dog. And also, could they even operate in a hallway knowing that it could get shot through a door to deal with this and x-ray it and all the things that they do, the special gadgets they have to see if this is an actual device. So, after a quick conversation, Levi and I, and what do we do? And our plan was, let's hope this doesn't blow up, but we got to breach the door. So we step out into the hallway. I had a ballistic shield. At the time, only K9 and SWAT had ballistic shields in patrol. Now patrol officers have tactical vehicles with breaching tools and shields. And so we stepped out in the hallway. Dave Newton shields the door of the suspect with a ballistic shield while Levi hangs a breach, and I cover that second door with my rifle. So as we step closer, I can see on the cart there's cameras taped to plates back towards us and down the hallway. So I reached down and flipped over the camera so it wasn't on us. I mean, he knew we were there if he was watching cameras anyway, but I'd rather him not know exactly where we were at. And I'll tell you, even reaching down and doing that, just because I saw the camera, we all thought that was a bomb and that was going to blow up.
Well, so what's going through your mind at that point? You have told this story multiple times and you kind of breeze through this part, but most human beings, granted, unless you're in the military and in active combat, don't have to see a device that they think is an explosive and make a choice to walk past it to try to get into the suspect's room. Also, they don't have to make the choice to flip over the camera so that he can't see you, thinking that this is probably going to explode, right? So that's a big deal. You had to make some decisions at that point, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, listen, I'll be honest. Part of me, it would have been great to wait for more resources. It would have been great to get a bomb dog up there and from a safe cover position, deploy the dog on it and see if it alerted. I mean, all of those things, in a perfect plan, that would have been ideal. But the problem is, it's the time for that. And so, I mean, I think all of us that made entry into that room knew that, the alternative of waiting, I mean, for us, it just wasn't an option. Mm-hmm. Because in our heads, in our minds, and knowing what was happening, that just meant more people would die.
So were there any specific thoughts that you had in that moment before you flipped the camera over? Was there anything that went through your mind?
I mean, really, it was, I hope this doesn't blow up. And if it does, then, the next team will have a clear path.
Yeah. That's really happy. And so then when you flip that camera and it doesn't explode, did you have any thoughts after that?
Glad that didn't explode. But no, I mean, at that point, we still didn't, we still thought, okay, this definitely could explode, right? So we stepped back into the little landing area and, we had the explosive breach We called down to the command post and told them that we're going to breach the door and see if we get any kind of response from this guy, and called the breach on the radio so the other officers down the hallway knew that what was going to happen, because we were also expecting when we breached the door to be met with gunfire. So we breached the door. It was a positive breach. The door went down. You could hear the fire alarm going off. Could still smell the gunpowder. I could smell the breach. Again, there's those little moments of chaos weaved in to the entire story, to the entire experience that night, and even that was chaotic.
Well, was it so like you flip the camera, it doesn't explode, and so does your heart rate settle at all? And then it's just like geared up for the next part, which is breaching the door. That doesn't explode. So explain kind of
Well, yeah,
your emotions at that time. Are you just so up and down that, or do you not feel anything because the adrenaline is so high?
it's a mix of both. So there was that, okay, I flipped this over and it didn't explode. And so you take a breath. But yes, the adrenaline is high. I was wearing a smartwatch and my heart rate was like 161 when we finally did make entry, which is, knowing, having been through critical incident after critical incident, that's pretty high. That's where you're going to start to lose fine motor skills and that. And even though I had been through so many, and it's, stress inoculation, you get used to it, so it doesn't affect you as much. There was this whole unknown and lack of control. Like going into a room, finding a bad guy in K9, that was familiar, dangerous, but something we did quite a bit. But having an explosive that I have zero control over whether this is going to, you know, blow up and we're all going to cease to exist, like that added to the stress. So there was moments of relief, but also that anticipation of what was next and what we were going to have to do next. So we stepped back out, like leaned out of the door, looking into the room, and we're not met with gunfire immediately, like we were anticipating. And there's communicating with Levi here a little bit. Like I saw that what I mentioned before, that scoped AR on the ground next to where he was trying to port the door, and
that was to be able to shoot at you, at any responding officers coming down the hallway.
Correct.
And so no one in his planning, no one would have been able to get to him, because
Correct.
he would have been able to shoot down that hallway at anyone approaching. The door nearest his room, he had sealed shut with an L bracket. Mm-hmm. So unless you had an explosive breach, you wouldn't have been able to get through that door. So he had done his work planning.
Correct. I mean, he had researched on the internet, like police SWAT tactics. Like he was prepared for what we were going to have to do, whereas we were reacting to what he was doing, right? And that's the hard part about getting your mind set for any kind of critical incident, or especially something like this where extensive planning went in on the suspect side, is they have months and months and months and years to plan this. You have seconds to make a decision. So, training correctly, and I had training scars, because, a training scar, you train for one thing and then it looks different when you get there, but you still react how you would to the original. And like when I'm staring at a breached door, I would have loved to have my dog with me, Loki. But when we were getting ready, Dave's like, hey, you want to grab a dog? And I said, no, we're going to kill this guy, not to go bite him. Because how I had trained is, why would you take a police dog through an active shooter, through a school or a mall, when people are running and there's chaos everywhere, and then you have this 100-pound animal that's, wanting to go also get involved in pulling you, you're not going to be as effective shooting somebody. Because my mind, because the training and making those decisions and his planning, didn't see it as we're going to be making entry into a room looking for somebody. Had I thought about that in the moment, I would have had him with me. So again, it's like if you prepare for specific types of events rather than thinking critically through stress and through chaos and through fear and anxiety, then those are some of the things that happen. And you can't prepare for every eventuality. Unfortunately, bad guys are creative, right? The people that are looking to do evil acts have, the internet at their disposal and all of these things to really plan a attack and know how we're going to respond. So we have to be able to think on our feet. So yeah, looking and seeing that rifle, knowing that this person was prepared for us, but we also knew we had to go in and clear the room. So we step out in the hallway. We have another SWAT officer and a couple of officers, detectives that are with him show up. We make entry into the suspect's room. I cover the secondary door as the first of the team goes in, and then I fold in behind him and we clear the suspect's room. And again, I'll tell you, like you're asking about emotional state. When I'm in that mode clearing, I was calmer than the anticipation of breaching.
Well, that's something you had done hundreds of times in K9, right?
Correct.
Well, I mean, just as a police officer in general, but especially in K9.
Yeah, going through a room looking for somebody that
Right.
may be armed.
Right.
And on top of that, the cart hadn't exploded at that point. I'll tell you, like, I was very focused on the cart until I was in the room, and then it was out of my mind. Like, I wasn't even thinking about it at that point. It was all I was thinking about before we went in. So we clear out the room. We find the suspect dead on the ground. He had a revolver next to him, which was indicative of a suicide, right? In that moment, I was like, oh, this person killed themselves. But we still are trying to figure out, like, still trying to, you have that mental delay of you're taking in all this information. Is this person a victim? Is this, did the suspect get out? We're hearing all these other calls on the radio. But we finish clearing the room, and then we do a secondary explosive breach on the connecting door. So when he was shooting between, I think the investigation showed, when he was shooting between the rooms down into the crowd, because he had two windows. He had broken a window out in 134 and was shooting, and he had broken a window out in 135 and was shooting. Well, the crosswind caused by breaking out those two windows, slammed the door and locked him in one of the rooms. So he wasn't able to get back into 134. But so it was locked. So we just did a breach from that door from the inside 135 into 134. So we did a secondary explosive breach. One of the SWAT officers, not Levi, so there was only two with us, had an AD. He AD'd his rifle into the room.
It's an accidental discharge.
Yeah, so he fired a 3-round burst into the room. But that was the only gunshots that happened in those rooms. And so we went and cleared the second room out. And then now it's like, okay, we're still behind on intel. So we take some of the, like the identification off the suspect. I find a file folder that had checks for the suspect's girlfriend, which we sent all down to the command post. So they had intelligence and they knew, because again, as there are multiple suspects, we have to start doing that investigation. I get together with my team, and now we're going to go back down to the bottom of the Mandalay Bay and go to the next one. Because as I said, on the radio, we're hearing all these other active shooters in Las Vegas. By the time we get down to the ground floor, they had started sending teams to these other ones as well and realizing what they were. And they were those ghost calls, right? Other victims in other places from this event. It just created these shockwaves throughout the strip. Something we've seen since on different events is, when you have that many people running into other places, it causes chaos and these additional ancillary, like, calls and events that seem real when they come in, but they absolutely weren't. And so then it's like, okay, I'm still a sergeant. I'm a leader. So I go into the command post that had been set up at South Central Area Command next door. I walk up to the incident commander he was a SWAT lieutenant. He was my former K9 lieutenant. And I looked at him like, John, what do you need? And he looks at me, he's like, I need a strike team at every property on the strip. So I spent the next 12 hours sending teams to different properties on the strip because, again, like I said, we took a black eye in Vegas and we wanted people to know that we are there to keep them safe. One of the things that I didn't mention earlier, but I make sure I talk about every time is the first responders, the police officers, the fire department. There was a lot of people that acted very brave in this chaos and saved lives. But so many lives were saved by normal citizens at the concert, just stepping up and helping people. There were people using bike racks as stretchers to get injured people out. It was a country concert, so there's a lot of pickup trucks nearby. They were putting victims in the trucks and driving them to local hospitals. Each hospital was almost like a war zone. You had blood on the floor and bodies and people there and doctors and nurses stepping up to help Like it's so much more than a police response or even a medical response. So yes, the two main priorities on any active shooter are how fast you kill the bad guy and how quick you get medical forward. But also it's, normal citizens stepping up to save lives. It saves so many more lives. And so, you think about that. You're 1 minute at a country concert, enjoying your time, and the next minute you're carrying bodies out, stepping up to do the brave thing. I was really proud. I think a lot of times people, they think Las Vegas doesn't really have a culture, right? You're from here, so it's like, oh, it's the Strip. I mean, we have 48 million people a year come to the Strip, but you know, there is a community here.
Well, and they stepped up, the community came together for months after, and they were donating massive amounts of food and water, not just to the police department, but I remember some friends and I got toiletries and things together. The families were staying, of the victims were staying at the Ronald McDonald House. And so the Ronald McDonald House opened their doors to these victims' families because they had to come here and identify bodies and get a lot of the victims were from out of town. And so Ronald McDonald House was housing these families, but the families didn't have food and they didn't have toiletries. They just, their whole lives were changed by that concert. And so the community stepped up to donate to these families. And it wasn't just in the couple days, it was the months and months donating blood. I mean, everybody, Las Vegas had not ever had anything like that happen before. And so yes, for the country being the deadliest mass shooting, that it was horrific and terrible. But for those of us that are from this community, which are very few and far between, it really kind of rocked everybody's worlds.
Yeah. I mean, just the magnitude of it, right? And the impact. And I still talk to people today. They're like, oh, you were on that? This is what happened. This is my story, or my loved one. I mean, my best friend since kindergarten, his little sister was at the concert. And so there is almost this community within the community of people that were impacted about it. That, like, there's people I literally only talked to on October 1st that, acquaintances, but then like we'll text each other. Hey, how you doing today? Like, and they're not cops. They're people that were there that I knew. Like, it was such a, not just a life altering event, but a culture altering event for here.
Well, it changed policing. It changed, at least here, it changed policing, the way that you responded to events, the way that you staffed events. During this festival, the command post, so Vegas Police, Las Vegas Metro always had overtime officers working these bigger events. And this one in particular, they had the command post. So that's like the centralized unit where all the overtime officers that are working respond to. And they had a lieutenant that usually oversees as the incident commander. And for this particular event, the command post was inside the festival grounds. And that posed a problem because then the command post was being shot at.
Yeah.
Right.
So rendering that command and control initially ineffective.
Right.
So that changed how, where command posts are placed, because you think you're in a trailer somewhere, you're good, but not on this. And then even the hotel industry, I was teaching a class, I want to say in Minnesota, and I had someone come up to me and tell me, oh, I was actually at a hotel in California on vacation with my family, and the security called me and said, hey, nobody's been in your room in a couple of days because you had the do not disturb. We need to come in and check the room. And they told that officer that came up and talked to me, it was strictly because of what happened in Las Vegas, that they now don't let somebody put a do not disturb sign up in a room, because on this, the suspect had do not disturb and was in there for days and days and days preparing for the attack. So, I mean, it just changed so much. One event.
So how did it change you?
Hmm. Well, I mean, we're still figuring that out. Is I would say my perception of trauma and myself and how to deal with things. Because up until then, like I was a child abuse detective, like we talked about in the last podcast, I just shoved everything down. Like, I don't want to deal with that. I'm not going to deal with that. It's hard. And the hard part, the problem with that is it works sometimes. Like, you up until that point in my career, I had been able to shoulder what I had seen. And although it had effects on me that I didn't know or realize yet,
False sense of security.
for sure. And that's why police officers don't have a long life expectancy after, because they don't process trauma. They have different levels of stress and, shift work and all of these things come into one. But like for me, that was not the right way, but that's how I dealt with the hard things that I'd seen. Well, I couldn't on this. I tried, but in the process of trying to not feel, like, I would say I was just like numb. One of the things I talk about in my book is like the idea of like going through life like a zombie, right? Like, I didn't feel a lot of bad. I didn't feel a lot of good. I was just kind of existing. And I mean, that's the whole point of the title of the podcast, right? Is to make hard decisions, to, be courageous and potentially sacrifice yourself to help other people. It is, that takes courage for sure. But it also takes courage to put the work in so you can still live after, because it's easier to not. But
it takes courage to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
It takes courage to see that you need to make changes in your life and get help. It takes courage to have hard conversations with those that you love and say, hey, I think you need some help. Right? It courage, yes, is running into burning buildings and stopping active shooters, but courage is also so much more than that.
Yeah, and so if you asked me in how this event changed me, it changed my perception on courage. Something that took me years to realize in therapy and all that is like, because I waited so long to do the work and to try and process what I've been through, it was that much harder. But it is hard. And that's the key to therapy and mental health. And police departments around the country are doing wellness bureaus and setting up all these resources for cops, but you also have to have the courage to use it and have the hard conversations with your spouse, with a mental health professional. It's hard to go in and talk about these things. I mean, today on this podcast, 8 years later, there's emotion in my voice. So I think what that event did, took me years to realize it, was to give me a different calling and to approach not just trauma for the sake of trauma. Like, every person that wears a badge in the United States deals with trauma. It doesn't matter if it's a small town, a big town, big city, like everybody experiences fatal car accidents, deceased kids, like all of that. So to just say, hey, this job is traumatic, you need to get help. I think a lot of cops or people listening to that message sometimes just kind of write it off. Like, yeah, we know it's traumatic. What that event did to me is give me the ability to stand in front of a room full of like cops or leaders or business professionals and tell my story, but also then use that as a lens to view getting help and view traumatic incidents and how we can be brave when we need to be. And it's not just bravery, just isn't sacrifice under gunfire. It's not just, stepping up when your life is on the line to help other people. Bravery can come in so many different forms. Bravery to make that call to a therapist and sit down and talk about everything you've been through in your life. And it's all relative. It doesn't have to be an event like we just talked about to be traumatic or be hard. So really changing my outlook gave me the ability to help other people through difficult times in their lives, whether that's relationship, whether that's in business, whether it's starting a small business with your spouse and, you know, putting your heart and soul into something and hoping that it's successful. I think that I have the ability to stand up in front of a crowd or a group, be vulnerable, but then also talk about lessons learned and not tactical lessons, not, hey, I should have went left when I went right, or I should have grabbed my dog when I didn't. But also like short term, medium term, long term, like here's a decision making process when you're scared. Here is how you can combat anxiety of making that decision to send a cop by themselves to a surveillance room, right? So it basically, a lot of awful things happened that night. But today, sitting here doing this podcast, it also gave me a level of clarity, right? On how you and I, through this medium and others, can help other people.
Well, it changed you. It impacted you in ways, some ways that were negative, but it also has impacted you for the better too,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you were able to then start your journey with therapy and start your journey with accepting that you have PTSD and doing what it takes to process through that and mitigate that so that your PTSD doesn't control you, right? And that's a whole other episode that we'll do down the line. But yes, you know, everybody goes through trauma and tragedy and really hard things. And unfortunately, that's part of living and being a human. And so you could have chosen to, and you did choose for a long time to kind of let that tragedy and that trauma dictate you and your life and how you were going to respond. And then you decided that you weren't going to continue in those patterns and you were going to change and do something different.
Yeah, and it wasn't easy to get there. It's not like I just woke up one day and like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. It was years of therapy. It's not always a linear path on therapy when you're doing that. It's good days and bad days. It's changing those problematic thinking patterns. It's having a partner that supports you, that sees the potential in you, even though you're not there yet, right? And so, yeah, it definitely affected me in a lot of bad ways. But again, I just go back to it, gave me clarity of purpose and for what we're doing today and what we can continue to do to help other people.
And that is to change the world.
To change the world. We're going to do it together, one podcast at a time.
One podcast at a time. Well, do you have anything else to add about this experience or any other thoughts from that day?
Well, I mean, I think it will be woven within because it was such a big part of my life through other podcasts and other stories. There'll be a lot of lessons that come from this, right? And ways that I can use those experience to provide, like value or context to other life lessons and how to push through tragedy, how to navigate fear, to realize that you can't ever be fearless, right? Fearless, looks good on a t-shirt, but it really isn't possible. We have these emotions for a reason. Like our fear and, anxiety and freezing all has a purpose, like to keep us safe. But there are times that you can't just be safe, right? I played it safe by not dealing with what I've been through and trying to stuff it all down. But sometimes playing it safe gets you further back than you would be. So, I mean, really, as we continue through our podcasts and the different lessons and stories and what we talk about, I'll be able to weave in experiences from this and other critical incidents that I've been involved with, those hard lessons. But then the other side is, I think it's important that we close it out today with so many people were impacted by this. So many people had their lives lost or lives changed. Children lost their parents. People, husbands and wives lost their spouses. People lost friends. So as we're telling this story, as we're going through this, know that each one of those victims they're always on our mind, right?
And the ones that are still alive that have to live with that trauma from that night, not just the first responders, but the people that were down there on the concert grounds being shot out as well.
Absolutely. So thank you for listening. We'll have another podcast coming out soon. And do you have anything to add before we move on?
Thanks for being here.
Okay. Thanks, guys.